back, superheroes, villains, and betweeners. We're continuing with the meal prep series on the meal prepping process. So now we're actually gonna get into like the meat of meal prepping. that was a little bit anyways, meal prepping process. Let's get into it, okay? So let's start with the meal prep essentials. Like, what do you actually need to meal prep, right? There's a couple of things that facilitate the meal prepping process, like having fresh, environmentally friendly meal prep containers, having a food scale, having cooking pots, cooking appliances like an oven, instant pot, multi-purpose toaster oven, and a blender. It really depends on the type of recipes that you're gonna prep. So I would make sure that you have some form of cooking. Microwaves are not ideal. I know sometimes people just have access to a microwave, but ideally you don't want to do most of your cooking in a microwave. I don't think that's sustainable either, but that's besides the point. Cooking utensils, you want to have a spatula, mixing spoon, whisk, knives, and I would have different knives as well to cut different things, right? You don't want to use the same knife to cut meat and fish, to cut fruits and vegetables. Not hygienic, and it's also not safe, right? Prepping and mixing bowls, I like to have about 4 to 5 to prep different grains, meats, and things like that. And as you're cooking foods, you want to make sure you have somewhere to place them, right? You don't just want to place them on your table or something. So you want to make sure you have that. Cutting boards, make sure that you have different cutting boards. I would not cut, just like the knives, I wouldn't cut meat on the same cutting board that you cut fruits and vegetables, just for contamination and food safety reasons. You want to have one cutting board for raw meat. Also, I know some people cut the meat and fish on the same cutting board. I wouldn't do that either, because fish are exposed to different microorganisms that are not compatible with meat. So I would separate raw meat, raw fish. I would have a specific cutting board just for fruits and vegetables. And I would have a specific cutting boards for bakery and dairy products like cheese and other dairy things. I would also have storage containers to store any extra and leftover foods you have, right? You never know when you're gonna eat extra ingredients throughout the week. So these definitely do come in handy. All right, so let's start with the actual planning ahead process. You wanna make sure you create a grocery list to kind of really anchor your focus in the supermarket store and not buy anything that you don't need. You want to make sure that before you even think about going out shopping, you clean out your fridge and pantry and check what items need to be tossed, eliminated, or restocked. And make sure you get rid of the items that you don't necessarily need or have expired, right? You want to have a specific menu or idea of recipes before you actually do the shopping, right? I would start out very small. I would start out prepping one meal until you build the habit. And then once you build the habit, you can prep 2 to 3 meals at a time or more. But definitely keep it small and simple at the start. Have a specific recipe or recipes in mind. Know the ingredients that you need, and program the quantity of ingredients. And what I mean by that is that if you have a recipe that requires 4 ounces of chicken, and you're going to prep the chicken for, let's say, 5 days a week, you're going to have to multiply 4 ounces of chicken times 5. And that gives you the amount of chicken you need for the whole week. So 4 times 5 is 20. You'll need 20 ounces of chicken for the week. I do want to express that dry and wet food weight are completely different. A lot of people measure their food wet, and that's different from when the food is actually cooked. When the food is actually cooked, it releases all the water, so it's gonna have a different weight from the start of the actual cooking time. So yeah, you want to make sure you calculate and estimate the food ingredients and quantities that you need for the whole week based on the recipes that you have ahead of time. Keep it simple and variable. I know this is contradicting, and you're gonna find I'm kind of a contradiction, but I've been able to find the middle ground and balance by doing this. So what I mean by simplicity and variability is that you wanna be simple in that you have recipes with minimal ingredients, but you wanna be variable in that you can rotate and have some sort of flexibility with the recipe so you don't get bored. So you have a basic meal structure, right? And then you can kind of be flexible with the overall ingredients in the meal. I'm just going to use a burger as an example, right? You go to a restaurant, you have a burger, you have a Mexican burger, you have a regular burger, and then you have a mushroom burger. You see how they're all burgers, but they're different types of burgers. You can do this with your meal prepping as well. Like, you can use the burger as the base and the structure, and then you dress up the recipes in different way depending on what you need for the day, or what you what will hit that satiety factor and that satisfaction factor for you that day, right? I'm a huge texture eater. Sometimes I just need a food that's like squishy or just like wet compared to dry. Like, I need to have that flexibility with my meals so I can tailor it based on my needs for the day. And as human nature, we all have our own nature, and balance and reaching an overall balanced physique, we need to know how to balance our nature with food, right? Sometimes, like, due to weather or like how we're feeling in our bodies, we might feel extra dry, so we can use wet foods to counteract that dryness quality within ourselves. Break it up and break it down, right? So break it up as in you want to break up your grocery list into categories and food types, but you also want to break it down as in you want to have a variety of choices and options, right? So if you have meat on your grocery list, you can break it down as in what types of meats and cuts are you going to get. Are you going to get chicken? Are you going to get turkey? Are you going to get turkey breasts? Like, break it up and break it down. Have a specific organization and structure, but also be flexible with it so you don't get bored. Lastly, prioritize and finalize. Stay committed to your grocery list. I know this is hard when you have a lot of food temptation in the grocery store. But buy items that you need, and buy items that are promoting the relationship that you want with food, right? If you're trying to have a healthy gut or digestion, ideally you don't want to buy the fluffy foods with the extra ingredients like artificial sweeteners, right? The alcohols, you want to avoid that, right? So make sure you have food choices that are in alignment and reinforce the values and the overall health goals that you have in mind. And just also visualize the food environment that you want to have, right? If you want to have a positive relationship with food, your environment needs to reinforce that, because as human nature, we're very visual creatures. What we see is what we get. So sometimes you could have a goal to like eat less processed foods, but if you have processed foods in your home, is that really beneficial? Is that really serving you? Be intentional and strategic with your space. Align your space with your overall goals. So this is before we actually start to meal prep. You want to make sure you prepare yourself for success, right? If you don't prepare, you will definitely fail, right? So we already covered the grocery list, right? So we also want to have a positive grocery shopping experience. We want to make sure that you have everything you need so you don't have to run back and forth to the supermarket while you're meal prepping. So make sure you have all the ingredients you need for the recipe or recipes that you're going to prep, and just clean out your food environment in advance so you don't have any extra items in your space and you don't have any unnecessary things in your space. Set intention and direction. I know I'm a firm believer in that. We need a specific aim and direction to anchor ourselves towards a specific outcome. So before you even meal prep, think about why you're meal prepping and use that as positive reinforcement to continue to get yourself to actually engage in the process and not just do it mindlessly, right? Mindfulness can definitely help create a better experience and sustain the practice over time. Remember your purpose. Remember your why. Remember why you're meal prepping in the first place, right? This helps you really just find that motivation from within and really just kind of counteract any negative experience you might experience while meal prepping. Communication is key, not just in life, but with meal prepping, especially if you live with like other family members. We have to be willing to communicate our boundaries and our time with other family members or just roommates in general to make sure that we have a positive experience, right? We have to be willing to work and collaborate with others in order for us to get it done, right? So if that means, okay, I'm going to meal prep at this time, so I'm going to communicate to others that within this time I'm going to be using the kitchen, so I would appreciate if I could have just this specified time block to actually get this done. So definitely having that communication with others is very important to have a positive meal experience overall. During the actual meal prepping, let's get to it. We're creating the space. We're setting up our space for our success. We're making sure that we're in a clean, clear, and free space that we can navigate through. Navigation is key, right? There's nothing like meal prepping and like just having clutter and unnecessary things that you don't need in the way, right? You want to make sure that you can easily move through and just like switching gears, right? We're superheroes in the kitchen. We're switching gears, we're switching our focus, we're staying aligned and committed to the outcome of meal prepping. Set an ambiance, right? Sometimes it helps. Sometimes just having soothing music in the background can help me get into the vibe of meal prepping, set the tone, and just keep the energy flowing, which is key with meal prepping. Organization. It depends if you grocery shop and meal prep on the same day. I like to do it the same day just so I could just streamline into it, but this doesn't always happen. So when you do get ready for meal prepping, you want to make sure that you organize the ingredients, right? You categorize them, whether it's by recipe or by overall washing and cutting process, whatever's going to make it easiest for you to get it done as fast and as furiously as possible. Put away anything you don't need. Declutter. Make sure that we're visually aligned and primed to meal prep. And I just want to cover a very simple meal prep flow that could just help facilitate the process. It depends on your overall preferences, but for me, I found it easiest when I just start off by first laying out the ingredients, making sure everything is organized in a specific space. Washing everything thoroughly, literally, is key. You don't want to be like prepping, cutting, cooking all at once. It's overwhelming and it's unnecessary. Wash everything in advance. Next step, cutting. Cut them whether all together or by recipe. It's up to you and your preference. Cooking. You want to make sure that things are cooking and you have a specific flow to cooking as well, because I know when you're cooking with different appliances, it can get tricky. Sometimes you have pots over here, oven over there, another appliance over there. You want to make sure that you really just anchor every appliance, whether you do things at once or whether you have split things up by times, right? So if this is cooking for 20 minutes, I'll do this at the same time so they could both cook for 20 minutes, or rotate, right? If something takes longer, then just systemize and get into a flow. I would say just flow is key. You don't want to be like chopping away at your energy. You want to have something that flows, right? So get in tune, connect to your environment, and see what flows and what you can do over time as you meal prep every week. Prep and assemble. So once everything's cooked and ready, you want to make sure you arrange your meals specifically into containers based on your preference as well, and just make sure you organize them in a way that's going to, number one, be aesthetically pleasing. I've definitely been in time crunches and I just throw shit in a fucking container. And then when I'm gonna eat it, I'm just like, this shit don't even look right. I don't even want to eat this right now. And then I end up buying something because it doesn't look right. So for me, I am a visual eater. I'm into like the whole aesthetic of a meal. So it does have to look, food presentation is very, very important. So make sure it looks pleasing and appetizing and not like fucking a mess, because you're not going to want to eat it when it comes time to eat it during the week. So just make sure that it looks presentable and aesthetically pleasing to your eyes, right? Whether that's through color, cutting, the way you cut things. I know like that's important to me. Like it has to be cut in a specific way. The colors that I use, the ingredients. Again, food is very personal, right? So the food ingredients that we choose are very personal as well. And we want to dive deeper into why we choose those specific ingredients and reinforce them through our food habits, right? Next, we want to store them in a refrigerator, right? So first, once they're cool, we want to store them appropriately in the refrigerator in size order. So usually like the meats go on the bottom because they have the highest cooking time, and then working your way up to fruits and vegetables because they don't require as much cooking time. So you want to make sure you store your food containers in order and just are organized in the fridge as a whole. Once the meal prepping is done, it's cleanup time. You want to make sure you clean up your environment, you wash the dishes, you get it all together, and you just store the food safely. And just make sure that you store unused ingredients or leftover foods accordingly, right? You could store them in Ziploc bags or just other containers that you're not using. Make sure again, it's all about prepping and priming, making sure that you have a positive experience and that you could systemize and do this over time. So that completes the meal prep process. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you're able to find your own meal prep flow that you're able to do over time and move you closer and closer towards your goals every single week.